So did you just pick up Baldur's Gate 3, but you've never played a tabletop role-playing game, never played Dungeons & Dragons, Knights of the Old Republic, Divinity Original Sin 2, anything like that that relies on dice rolls rather than just, hitting things really hard like in Skyrim? Well, then I'm happy to tell you that you have arrived at the correct video. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Gaming Your Own Way. My name is Chad, and today we are going to go over the very basic Dungeons & Dragons mechanics that are used inside of Baldur's Gate 3. My hope is that after you guys watch this video, you have a basic understanding of how, well, pretty much everything. Okay, everything's pushing it, but most of the things that you will encounter within Baldur's Gate 3 with regards to the Dungeons & Dragons mechanics, dice rolls, attack rolls, saving throws, difficulty classes, all of that will be answered here, so you have a fluency within the language of the game and you understand what is going on. If by some miracle you do end up finding this video helpful, hit the like button and the subscribe button and the notification bell so you get notifications of new videos like this. Additionally, let me know down in the comments if this helped you out. It always makes me feel good to know I'm providing you guys with some level of value. And because I know that I'm not perfect, if there's anything that I skip over, anything I'm not super clear on, anything that you think could be explained just slightly better, put it down in the comments so that everyone else can learn too. We're here to create a community and to help foster each other's growth within the game. And if you don't have anything to say, just comment your favorite emoji. Your engagement is a massive help to the channel. It helps me, it helps the channel grow, and it helps other people find this video. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about 16-ish mechanics that are from Dungeons & Dragons that are used in Baldur's Gate 3. To start us off, right off the bat, when you're doing character creation and you pick your race, your class, your background, you are going to see your ability scores. These ability scores are going to determine if your character is going to be snooping around in the dungeons or if he's going to be whipping the ass of the dragons. So let's go through each one of these ability scores and talk about what they do. First off, let's talk about strength. That's going to determine your chance to hit enemies with most melee weapons, how hard you hit them with melee weapons, how far you can jump, how much you can carry, and how heavy of things you can push, lift, or drag. For your carrying capacity, that's going to be your strength ability score times 15. And for how much you can push, lift, or drag, that's going to be your strength ability score times 30. Now, there are some things that can alter this, such as if a character is heavy or light, but we're not going to go into that in this video. Next up, we have Dexterity. That's going to determine your chance to hit things and how hard you hit things with ranged weapons and some melee weapons. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Your Initiative, which is your chance to go first in combat. We'll talk about that later as well. And your Armor class, or how hard it is for you to be hit. So basically, Strength is how hard you can throw a table at someone, and Dexterity is how hard you can bend under the table that is thrown at you. Constitution is going to govern how many hit points you get at the beginning of the game and whenever you level up. It's also used for a lot of saving throws in the game, including Concentration, which we will talk about when we get to Spellcasting. Intelligence is going to be used for skill points, and it's going to be the spellcasting modifier for wizards. Wisdom, similarly, will be used for skill checks and as the spellcasting modifier for clerics, rangers, and druids. And then you have charisma, which is going to determine your overall likability. How much can you talk someone down off a ledge, or I guess talk someone into jumping off a ledge. And it's also going to be used as the spellcasting modifier for bards, warlocks, paladins, and sorcerers. Now, for the most part, these ability scores, the actual number, doesn't actually matter all that much. What we're going to care about is the ability modifier. The modifier for an ability score is going to be 0 at level 10, and then it's going to go up by 1 or down by 1 for every 2 points you invest. So the modifier is only going to increase at even number intervals, meaning that odd numbers and even numbers for most things are going to be equivalent. Meaning if I'm a warlock and I'm trying to cast Eldritch Blast and I have a 16 in charisma versus a 17 in charisma, my modifier is still going to be +3. The only benefit, for the most part, of having an odd ability score is just that it's one closer to the next even one. You are going to get 27 of these points to distribute for your character. The more points that you put into an individual ability, the more expensive it gets to increase. You will also get to pick one ability to give a +2 to and one ability to give a +1 to. The maximum possible ability score at character creation is 17, but that can be raised higher throughout the game given different feats that you can get as you level up and different items that you can pick up in the game. Next, let's talk about saving throws. That is going to be your ability to negate or resist different effects throughout the game. These are going to happen a lot. Saving throws are going to be determined by your ability modifiers and your proficiency bonus, which we will talk about very shortly. Whenever someone or something is trying to inflict a negative effect on you, you will roll a saving throw, which is going to need to exceed some sort of difficulty class, which we'll talk about what a difficulty class is a little bit later. The saving throw is going to be 1d20 or 1 20-sided die, plus the related ability modifier, plus, if applicable, your proficiency bonus. If your saving throw is greater than or equal to the difficulty class, then you are saved, and the effect of whatever this is either going to be nullified or reduced. It depends on the effect that is being inflicted. For example, Fireball, you're going to reduce the damage that's received, but if it's Hold Person, you are going to resist being held entirely. Next up, let's talk about skills, and this is going to govern how good you are at doing things in Baldur's Gate 3. These are going to be determined by your ability modifiers and your proficiency bonus. Again, we're going to get to the proficiency bonus in a second, calm down. Additionally, you're going to be able to pick 2 skills out of 5 skills to be proficient in, which is determined by your class. There are also a lot of items and pieces of gear in the game that can buff your skills. Whenever you try to do basically anything in the game, you're going to roll what is called a skill check. There's going to be a difficulty class that's going to be associated with how difficult the task is you're trying to accomplish. For example, if you're trying to talk a thug into leaving some poor innocent guy alone, that might be a difficulty class of, say, 15. But if you're trying to convince that same thug to then go jump into a pit of lava, that might be a difficulty class of, say, 40. Whenever you roll a skill check, a saving throw, anything like that, if you roll a 1, that is called a critical fail, and if you roll a 20, that is called a critical success. A critical fail means no matter how high your ability score is, how high your modifiers are, how high your proficiency bonus is, it doesn't matter what those numbers are. If you roll a 1, you always fail the check. Similarly, if you roll a 20, that means you always succeed. That is why Matt Mercer always tells you, you can certainly try, because in Dungeons & Dragons, almost everything is technically possible. You have that 5% chance that you could roll the nat 20. But to roll a skill check, it's going to be a d20 roll, plus or minus your ability modifier, plus your proficiency bonus if you are proficient in that skill. If that number is greater than or equal to the difficulty class, then you will succeed, otherwise you will fail. All right, I've mentioned it twice, so now let's talk about proficiency. First, your proficiency bonus is going to start at 1 at level 1, and then it's going to increase by 1 every 4 levels for a maximum of 4. That proficiency bonus is going to be added to almost every check involved for something that you are proficient in other than dealing damage. So what is your character going to be proficient in? Well, that is going to be determined by your class, your background, and your race. At character creation, if you read the little tooltips, it will tell you what your character is going to be proficient in. Additionally, every class is going to have 2 abilities that they are proficient in. For example, the Warlock is proficient in Charisma and Wisdom. That means whenever they have to make like a saving throw with Charisma or Wisdom, they get to add their proficiency bonus to that saving throw, in addition to their Charisma or Wisdom modifier. What weapons and armor you're proficient in are going to be determined by your race and your class, and as you level up, you can get feats, which will also allow you to be proficient in certain weapons or armor. Now be careful, because there are bad things that happen to you if you try to use things that you are not proficient with. First, let's talk about if you are proficient. If you are proficient with a weapon, say you're proficient with a 2-handed weapon, then you are going to get to add your proficiency bonus to your attack rolls, which we'll talk about attack rolls in a minute. And in addition, with that weapon, you're going to get some nice abilities that you otherwise wouldn't have as well, like Pommel Strike. Now, however, if you're wearing armor or a shield and you're not proficient with an armor or a shield, then some not super great things are going to happen to you. Whenever you roll any ability check, save, or attack roll, you are going to be rolling with disadvantage, which is not super fun. Oh, and did I mention you also can't cast spells? That's why you're probably not going to see Gale walking around in a set of chain armor. All right, now I said if you're wearing armor you're not proficient with, you're going to be rolling with disadvantage. What is advantage and disadvantage? Advantage, simply put, is when you roll with 2 dice and you take the higher option. Meaning if I'm trying to persuade this guy to jump into the pool of lava and I roll with advantage and I roll, say, a 3 and a 17, the 17 is what I will take. Disadvantage, on the other end, is like you would expect. I rolled the 3 and I rolled the 17. I get the 3 now. You want to avoid disadvantage at all costs if possible. Disadvantage can be imposed by various spells, by wearing armor that you're not proficient in, by attacking someone with a ranged weapon while they're within melee range, attacking an enemy that is obscured by darkness, or attacking someone outside of your normal range. Next, let's start getting into some of the combat mechanics of the game, and let's talk about armor class. Your armor class is going to basically govern how hard it is for someone to hit you. Your armor class, or AC for short, is going to start at a base of 10 plus your dexterity modifier. There are also some exceptions, like the monk will also add their wisdom modifier to their armor class as well. Different types of armor may also increase your armor class as well. Now, really important to note, there are some pieces of armor that are going to say max dexterity modifier, max dexterity of 2, for instance. What this means is, say you have an 18 in dexterity, so that means your dexterity modifier is 4. But you're wearing a piece of armor that says max dexterity 2. That means from your armor class, you're only going to be able to contribute 2 points from your dexterity modifier, the other 2 are wasted. So if I have medium armor that increases my armor class to 14 and has a dexterity modifier of 2 max, that means my armor class will be 16. It will not be 18 because the other 2 extra points are being restricted by the armor. It's also worth noting that this does not restrict your ability to hit things. It's not restricting your dexterity modifier for like ranged weapons, just for your armor class. All right, if we're worried about armor class, that means we're probably in battle, so let's roll initiative. Initiative is going to determine the order of the battle, the order in which people are going to take turns in battle. Baldur's Gate 3 is slightly different from Dungeons & Dragons in that Baldur's Gate 3, initiative is determined by a d4 plus your dexterity modifier. There are feats and other things that can increase your initiative, but we're not going to talk about those in this video. While you're in combat, you may want to move around on the battlefield. Your movement speed is going to be determined by your race, class, and level. Most races can move 9 meters per turn. Some exceptions being the dwarves, gnomes, and halflings can only move 7.5 meters per turn, and then wood elves and half wood elves can move 10.5 meters per turn. There are some things that can restrict your movement speed, such as being encumbered, being slowed, or navigating difficult terrain. Now, while you're in combat, you're going to be concerned about your hit points. It's going to be your vitality. How long are you staying alive in this battle? Your hit points are going to be determined by your constitution modifier and your hit die. Your hit die is going to be determined by your class. You can see it in character creation. If you don't know what your hit die is, the easiest way is to reduce your constitution, because I think it pre-fills your constitution. Hit that down to 10, and then if you look, it will tell you, I'll put it on the screen, it'll tell you what your hit die is. At first level, upon character creation, you're going to start with the maximum roll of your hit die. So for example, a warlock I think is 1d8, so they will start with 8 hit points plus whatever their constitution modifier is. On subsequent levels, you are going to roll your hit die rather than take the maximum. So if it's 1d8, you could roll a 7, you could roll a 2. And then it's going to be that roll, plus your constitution modifier is going to be the number of hit points that you get at 2nd level, 3rd level, etc. Now it's worth noting that throughout the game you can respec, or you will find items that can change your ability scores. If your constitution ability score changes enough that your modifier changes, that change is going to be retroactive for every level you have accrued. Meaning if at character creation I had a +2 to constitution, and then later in the game I get that up to a +3, that one extra hit point from that +1 ability modifier is going to be added for every level I've gotten so far. While we're on the subject of hit points, let's talk about temporary hit points. Temporary hit points are hit points that are temporary. Who saw that coming? They are hit points you have over and above your regular hit points. Whenever you take damage, you're going to detract damage from your temporary hit points before your regular hit points. It's important to note that temporary hit points do not stack, meaning if you have one thing that is trying to give you 3 temporary hit points and another thing that is trying to give you 5 temporary hit points, you're going to take the maximum. You're going to get 5 temporary hit points, not 8. But now what happens if your hit points reach 0? Well, it's not great. You're going to enter a state of what's being called downed. And when you are downed, you are going to begin making death saving throws. Unless you're on easy difficulty, then you just stay downed. Every time your character takes what would be their turn in combat, they're going to roll a d20. A 1 to 10 is a fail, and an 11 to 20 is a success. If you get 3 failures, you die. If you get 3 successes, you get back up, you are no longer down, you stop bleeding, and you gain 1 hit point. You will also become stable if someone comes and uses the help action to help you up, or if someone heals you. This can be by someone throws a potion near you, or if someone uses a spell to increase your hit points. But if anything increases your normal base hit points, not temporary hit points, your normal hit points, then that is going to bring you up from a down status. It's also worth noting that anytime an enemy inflicts damage on you while you are downed, that is going to add 1 failure to your death saving throws. So if you're downed and it hasn't even been your turn yet and you get hit 3 times by enemies, boom, sorry man, you're done. If you do happen to die, there are different mechanisms throughout the game where you can be revived, whether that's talking to a specific person at camp that is capable of reviving allies. There are scrolls of Revivify, and there are spells that can revive allies as well. It's also worth noting that in Baldur's Gate 3, there are no critical fails or critical successes when making death saving throws. Meaning if you roll a nat 20, you don't automatically get back up, and if you roll a 1, you don't get 2 failures. All right, but if we're talking about combat, obviously the idea is you want to inflict enough damage to reduce your enemy's hit points to 0. And how are you going to do that? You are going to use weapons, right? Or you're a monk and you use your fists, or a sorcerer and you use Oh, okay, you just want to kill people, all right? We'll get to spells in a second. Let's talk about weapons. Weapons are things you can smack and or shoot things with. Many weapons are going to have various properties, but there are 3 that are of crucial importance. Those are going to be the finesse property, the two-handed property, and the versatile property. All of these properties should be listed if you hover over the item. Finesse weapons are important because the attack and damage on those are going to scale with dexterity if your dexterity is higher than your strength. If your strength is higher, you can still use your strength modifier. Two-handed weapons are going to require 2 hands to use, I guess. And then versatile weapons can be used in 1 hand or 2 hands. Think about a long sword, and they are going to deal more damage if they are used in a 2-handed fashion. There are other properties such as ranged, light, heavy, etc. We're not going to go into those right now. Now, in your effort to reduce an enemy's hit points down to 0, you're going to have to attack them with your weapon. Whenever you attack an enemy, you are going to try to hit them. Before you actually hit them, you're going to try to hit them. To do this, you are going to roll 1d20 plus your strength modifier, or if it's a ranged weapon or a finesse-based weapon, your dexterity modifier if that is higher. Well, for ranged weapons, it's always dexterity. Additionally, if you're proficient with that weapon, you will add your proficiency bonus onto your attack roll as well. If you roll a 20, you are going to score a critical hit. It will land regardless, and you will deal damage. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Additionally, for some spells and cantrips, you're going to use your spellcasting modifier rather than strength or dexterity. So for instance, a wizard's going to use intelligence modifier, and a warlock would use their charisma if they're doing, like, say, Eldritch Blast. If your attack roll is greater than or equal to your enemy's armor class, you land a hit. Otherwise, you miss. So now let's talk about what happens if you land a hit. You're going to deal damage to that person. Every weapon should have an amount of damage dice that is listed if you toggle over the item. Whenever you deal damage, you are going to roll your damage dice, and that is the amount of damage you're going to inflict, plus your strength or your dexterity modifier. Important to note, you will not add your proficiency bonus for damage rolls, only for attack. Now, we talked about earlier, if you roll a 20, you land a critical hit. A critical hit means you are going to roll your damage dice twice rather than once, add those numbers together, and then add on your strength or your dexterity modifier. Okay, are you guys still with me? Because we've been through a lot. Hopefully you're still with me. Next, let's move on to spellcasting principles. First off, let's talk about your spell save difficulty class, because that's going to be really important. Is whenever you cast a spell, what is the difficulty class? How hard is it for your enemy to resist the effects of your spell? Your spell save difficulty class, or DC, is going to be 8 plus your spellcasting modifier plus your proficiency bonus. Your target is then going to roll a saving throw against your difficulty class. If they pass their saving throw, they are either going to negate or resist some of the effects of the spell. The ability score that your enemy is going to roll in order to save against a spell, or that you will roll in case of an enemy spell, is listed in the effects of that spell. And as we talked about earlier, that saving throw is going to be 1d20 roll plus their ability score modifier plus their proficiency bonus if they are proficient in that ability score. Now, if you're casting spells, you are going to be casting spells using spell slots. This isn't Skyrim where you just have like a mana bar and you can cast as many spells as you want. You are limited by what are called spell slots. First though, let's talk about cantrips, or level 0 spells. Cantrips require no spell slot to be used, and you can cast those as many times as you want. They also typically deal less damage. Calm down, warlocks, typically deal less damage than spells. First level spells and higher though require a spell slot to use them. You will gain spell slots as you level up. The number of spell slots you have, you know the drill, they're determined by your class and your level. Whenever you expend a spell slot, that spell slot is gone until you take a long rest. There's just like a massive asterisk next to that though, because there are ways to regain spell slots that are not using a long rest. For example, warlocks will get their warlock spell slots back after taking a short rest, and wizards can just like will themselves to have more spell slots back. Sorcerers can spend sorcery points to get spell slots back. Okay, so you don't have to wait a long rest, all right? You don't have to always wait a long rest. It's also worth mentioning that spells that are at a lower level can sometimes be cast at a higher level for increased damage or more potent effects. For example, Fireball, because it's everyone's favorite spell, is a level 3 spell. If you cast it at a higher level, you are going to increase the amount of damage that Fireball does. So say you're out of level 3 spell slots, but you have a level 4 spell slot, you can still cast Fireball as a 4th level spell. Now, while you're casting spells, some spells are going to require you to concentrate on those spells. These spells usually have long-lasting effects that can occur throughout several turns. Once a caster uses one of these spells that requires concentration, the effects of that spell are not going to stop until one of the following things happens. 1, the duration of the spell just ends. A lot of concentration spells are used for a max of 10 turns. 2, the caster uses a different spell that also requires concentration. You can't concentrate on too many spells at once. Sorry, your mind's just not that good. 3, you are downed or killed. That's going to end the effect of the spell. And then number 4, if you take damage and fail a concentration saving throw. Yes, because while you are concentrating, someone can damage you to try to stop you from concentrating on that spell. If someone damages you, you are going to need to make a saving throw. Concentration saving throws are always constitution based. So your saving throw is going to be a d20 plus your constitution modifier plus your proficiency bonus if you are proficient in constitution. It's also worth noting that if an attack hits you and it deals multiple types of damage, you are going to have to save per instance of damage that you receive. All right, guys, I think that's it. I think that covers all of the basic fundamental things within Dungeons and Dragons that you need to know to be successful at Baldur's Gate 3. Now, certainly you can be successful and you can just play your way through Baldur's Gate 3 without knowing these things, but it does definitely help to know, the vernacular that is being used. If you found this helpful or learned something, or you just like the video or you like me and you want to support me, hit the like button. I appreciate it. It helps me, it helps the channel, and hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you get notifications from new videos like this. Additionally, once again, for the algorithm, comment down below, let me know if this helped you. If you have anything else to add that I didn't mention, or if you have nothing to say, just comment your favorite emoji, because again, it goes towards engagement, it helps the channel, it helps other people find the video, and I really appreciate it. Guys, thank you so much. I hope you have a blast playing Baldur's Gate. Let me know if you have any questions down in the comments, and we will see you in a later video. Have a great day.